So today we are going to have a scholarly talk on life, which is the title of our YouTube channel. And my name is Elizabeth Walker, and I have been a professor for 10 years in the area of political science, higher education, and women's studies, as well as English. And so all of these is like a transdisciplinary scholar. So our look, and then every week we want to come with some different panelists. And so my co-host is Carrie Citizen. And so today and she'll introduce herself as well. And we're just really excited to be able to come and provide great feedback about looking at a scholarly perspective of social issues that we can root in academic research, as well as look at political topics of the day. So, Carrie, would you like to provide commentary on who you are to our audience in our our very first podcast?
Hi, my name is Carrie Citizen. I am a business owner, which I have two corporations, and I've just completed my bachelor's in science in child and adolescent. I have my AA degree in psychology and child development, and I have been attending several colleges and looking and being a part of political views. So I feel like coming from a student's perspective as well as an educator for um, infant through college levels children and adults, I feel that they have a view that sometimes is not heard through their own individual eyes. So I feel that we can bring you their views through YouTube from the community and from the educational college perspective. And we hope that we can get some response from you guys, or maybe some ideas or some things that you may be interested in learning about.
So today we're going to have two small discussions, and we're combining this discussion because both of them are commentary on today. So the first one is dealing with Kanye West comments on slavery being a choice. So the fact that his premise of his argument is that slavery probably wasn't voluntary at first, but the fact that slaves stayed in slavery for a certain number of years, for hundreds of years, then he feels, and his quote is 400 years. Why did it stay essentially for so long to where it moved away from being oppressive to then a choice for them being in enslavement? Essentially, his argument, that's the premise. What he is meaning to discuss is that slavery is not just an action. It's not just bondage, physical bondage. It's the fact that people made a choice to be mentally in bondage continuously beyond the chains. So Frederick Douglass made in his the slave narrative of Frederick Douglass, he makes a statement talking about how freedom, even though he was always in chains, he was always free in his mind, right? And so essentially it didn't matter. It mattered to him, of course, being free, but essentially that bondage was just the chains and being whipped were just things that were momentary, but they could never take essentially his quote unquote freedom that always arises in his head. So Kanye West was this is the premise of it. And so what we want to do is discuss kind of the groundwork on, on what we thought about it, and then trying to ground some of the commentary with a scholarly look at how, yes, it, on how it felt, and maybe even try to root what Kanye West was saying as not being, um, not necessarily completely ignorant, but looking at it from a different perspective of what he was actually talking about. So when you heard it, what did you feel?
When I heard it,
When you heard his comments, what did you think?
my first original thought was, okay, this is Kanye. You know, I from Kanye, I expect scholarly. How would I say scholarly things that are founded, but because he has a certain set of people that respect him, like for us the rap people or the people from the community, right? They respect him for his lyrics and stuff that he's singing, his music, right? But right now, what he's speaking about, they can't really understand it. You know, it's like they hear him saying some words, right? Meaning that they because I've seen a lot of people that said that they stopped watching, they took him off their Twitter page and they don't want to talk to him.
He did lose 2 million Twitter followers within hours.
Right. But was that 2 million Twitter followers that really was listening to the words that he said, or was that 2 million Twitter followers that heard a whole bunch of words and people just spread it around and nobody really looked into it the way you're looking into it, Elizabeth? I mean, you're putting it in a different perspective.
I'm not saying that what he said wasn't ignorant.
No, I know you're not saying that. I'm saying what you're saying is look at it in a different way.
But because what he said was, I mean, definitely offensive on its face.
Right.
Because, I mean, many of us, and I'll even speak for myself, that I'm, the third generation away from a plantation. So I'm not, that far away from, and many African Americans are not that far away from the plantation, right?
Well, my grandmother who raised me, because my mother died when I was 12, and my sister was 3. She told me about how she went and she couldn't drink out the water fountain because it said no blacks, and how she felt that they couldn't. She came from Texas.
Be like, what, 4 generations? She could be like 4 generations away.
Yes, she came from Texas. My grandmother migrated out here. My grandfather was a construction worker.
Most people in California migrated to California.
He was a construction worker. He came down here to work for another company, and he built the house. He waited till he got everything stable, and he sent for my grandmother to come with his 5 kids here. And my mother was born in Texas, and my father was born in Texas. So they migrated here. My father did auto mechanic, and my mother was a pediatrician nurse.
But the point is that what he said is definitely
coming
offensive.
From the root.
It's definitely offensive on its face. But let's take a pause and talk about a quote from Black Panther.
Okay.
And Black Panther, Killmonger made a comment in one of the last fighting scenes with T'Challa, was saying that he had infiltrated, essentially, the connotation is that he infiltrated within the colonizer, which would be white people, and was able to think like them and able to operate like them because he did attend, MIT. He was an elite force within the military. So he, tackled governments, like he killed a lot. So he was able to, he felt, think like them in order to utilize it for blacks and Africans, and being able, or anyone of African descent, being able to kind of be able to use it for their good to kind of topple white supremacy. Well, and T'Challa said, he countered that by saying that when you thought that you infiltrated, you began to think and behave like them, because the idea of you taking their information, essentially, or their training, and trying to use it against them is then in turn still the mindset of the colonizer. Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And so essentially, when we think about integration, we may never have thought about what are the implications of integration, and there are many implications of it. There's a higher level of crime. There's a higher, when it comes to, we have fewer black men who are fathers in the community because of integration. We have a breakdown in black community places,
and
like
in the family, just that foundation.
Like in California. Tell me where the black community is. We don't really have as many areas in California that are centralized. And you used to be able to say Ladera Heights was a black community, but because of some of the laws that were passed in the 1970s, early 1970s, late 1960s, it allowed blacks to start moving into areas that were historically white.
Mhm.
So you had Watts that was predominantly black, but then eventually they were able to move into Compton.
Right.
You had areas
because Compton was all white. Because if you look at the property,
it was
you can only hold stables. Look at the property in Compton. That's stables and guest houses for white people. They're the ones need all that space.
People don't realize that Compton has estates. They have mansions in Compton.
See, I come from,
and we have in Compton we have an airport.
Yes.
So,
yes. And a horse stable. I mean,
absolutely. Yes. There's a lot of horses in Compton. But I'm saying that there's, and so, in South Central was majority white. So, and then eventually, because of that, it was blacks were then be able to still move into communities within these areas, but then integration really began to break that down to where blacks began to really disperse. And we see that all over the country, but we definitely see that in Southern California where it really dispersed so greatly. And so you have children who are now being able to integrate within each other, which is integration is great. I'm not saying that it's not a great thing, but the implications are that African Americans are being raised in a predominantly white perspective
and mindset,
right? And so there was an article that I want to bring up. There's this article that came out about 7 years ago, and it was a white Londoner, and what she wrote about was that she lived in a country in which the majority of the children who are child slaves, the owners of these child slaves, are white women, and they use them for domestics. And so she ends this. They're talking about all the dangers of slavery and how horrible child slavery is, and how we should all do something. But her concluding statement was that now this is published in a scholarly article in a scholarly peer-reviewed journal. She ends it by saying that child slaves, children, minors, should feel empowered, and also sex slaves. So women who were hired in order to perform sex, they should feel empowered to free themselves.
So that means they're supposed to be able to free themselves on their own.
Exactly.
Wow. So even if they strapped up and tagged up, they
where do you go? If you are free, where do you go? You're in a country that is not your own.
Right. You can't fly out.
You have no money. Where do you go?
Right there. And just stay a sex slave. But you can get out on your own.
Child slave. Tell me, what is a child going to do? So a 10-year-old who frees themselves, where does that 10-year-old go?
He goes to different countries and become more a sex slave over there. That's just terrible.
So I bring that example up as that is the colonizer's mindset. Why is it that the colonized can't be free?
Yes.
And when Kanye West made this statement, it instantly triggered even though, yes, I'm offended as a black woman,
right,
but it also triggered my mindset of he is speaking like the colonizer, right, and forgot the notion of the colonized.
Right.
And when you put it in that perspective, but isn't this integration though? Like integration is what got him to this point that allowed him to speak like a colonizer.
Right. The freedom of being not a slave anymore.
Exactly. And so if we're going to say no longer being a slave of a slave mindset and free, then that means I should think like a colonizer. Right. Absolutely. And it's interesting if you read Alice Julia Cooper, which you should read. She's a SOAR. She's an AKA. She's lived 5 years. She was born in slavery, got her PhD at 66, right? She was a scholar. She opened up her own university. She literally became. She
Wow.
went. She was the president. She was everything.
Wow.
She ran a school of her blacks in Washington D.C. in order to get, and all of them went to Ivy Leagues. And this was in the 1920s, right?
That's why it can happen for us.
But my point is, Alice J. Cooper said, when you think of women, you think of white. And when you think of African American, you think of male. And so essentially it's, where is this gap for when you used to call yourself African American female? No one thinks of African American female, they think of women as being white. And essentially I bring this up because when you think about Kanye West, you are thinking of America, who tells this story, who tells the history, whose history is much more important. It is the colonizer. The colonized does not get a segment in history except a blurb. What happened to them from the colonizer and what we're allowed to know. It's
like you're living it through them.
Exactly.
And to add to that, I had someone say to me about a child who was an African American child, that if she was white, that her behavior will be seen differently.
Absolutely.
Meaning that instead of her being a bad, not listening, tantrum having child, she will be considered as intelligent, bright, and a leader.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So her whole behavior wouldn't be negative. They would take her behavior and make it positive.
So the notion of being a boss, being bossy, as a black woman, you're being bossy, you're being vocal, you're being, is looked upon as a white is being assertive and being and having and having agency, right? Yes. Having agency, right?
Yes.
But this, which leads and transforms us over to the Yale incident.
Right. Okay. Think about this, people.
The Yale incident. Her name is Lawani Sayambala. Now, which, if you watch the video that came out, which is even interesting because they didn't even know or attempt to pronounce her name. They kept mispronouncing her name, which was even more. There's a great deal of literature that talks about the name and how people are automatically are discriminating against blacks because of their name,
and Moesha.
Right?
And when they hear you call, let me tell you, when you get on the phone and you call for a job, please don't tell them your name is Moesha.
Stop that. You should tell them whatever your name is. It's your name.
But you know what? When you tell them that, they're not going to give you the opportunity.
Then I don't want to work at a place that can't value me by my name.
Okay, that is understandable. But if you need to pay your bills,
no.
If you need to pay your bills,
no.
Your name is not LaQuisha.
No, you better call me by my name, and you need to say it correctly. You need to spell it correctly, and you need to respect my name.
And when you tell them your last name as well, they connect it to ethnicity, so that you know people. You know.
Of course, we know this. But my point is,
I don't know about everybody.
We're getting off topic, right? We're getting off topic.
Okay. Back on topic, Elizabeth.
Back on topic. So this Yale incident. See, let's bridge this even more, right? So Kanye West was really, if you look at the history of higher education, when the first slave came to America, that was attached to a university. And so we had universities, Harvard being the first. And there's a great book on called Ebony and Ivy by Craig Wilder. And he describes
I read his books before.
He describes how at one point in New England, the largest slave plantation owner was higher ed.
Wow.
Right? And so
people, that meant they started off running the educational system from the plantation.
No. It means that they owned that many slaves. And so they owned slaves and was in the business of trading slaves because people would give them their slaves. So like I'm just like I'm giving you $10. They would give them their slaves in order for to Harvard to sell off their slaves and be able to found to build their institution. So these institutions were built on the dollars that they gained from slavery, right? And so there were slaves that were also, and then if you wanted to move there, you can move there and have your slave live with you in the quarters. So it definitely was, higher education was attached to slavery since its foundation. And Yale has always promoted itself as being an abolitionist school, in which it was not that at all. It was anti-abolitionist for a very long time. And it wasn't until closer to the freeing of slaves that they decided to shift their notion of being more interested in freeing slaves. But that didn't mean that they wanted multiculturalism. So after slavery was abolished, higher education began to have a conversation of how can we make these schools less multicultural. We don't want a multicultural society at all. We want to help fund African Americans to go back to Africa and colonize Africa and make Africans more Christian.
Wow.
Right? Because these people are less
worthy.
They're not capable of being able to understand anything.
And some of the most intelligent people, scientists and doctors and engineers, have come out those slaveries.
Out of what? You mean what?
Some of the people that was slaves. I mean, that history. Yes, there was a lot of people that became famous. People that we.
Absolutely, there were some, but I mean, I'm saying that systematically, higher ed was built on slavery.
The blood of the people that worked. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So all the people that did the cotton fields and all these things, they sold.
There were people who went to Harvard as a student and who was never interested in slavery and came out of it as
a slave owner.
A slave trader. Because they were being trained to trade slaves in order to help the university thrive.
Wow.
And so some of the faculty
were they actually educated them because they were going to go back and make more money for them, right? To buy more, to build more institutions.
And Princeton was the biggest one because Princeton did not want to. Princeton actually then went on to found other universities in the South to replicate their antebellum thought process. So even though it was in New Jersey, it was definitely not. It had a Southern mindset because it helped found some of the major universities that we still have today, like University of North Carolina. And I'm sure you've heard of University of North Carolina, right? So I say that to set up this young lady's experience at Yale. So she's sleeping and she's doing her homework. She decided to take a nap in the common area of her dorm. And a white woman does not believe that she should be there, and she calls the cops.
No, on her, and that's her dorm.
So she goes there. She sleeps there every day. She's been there since the fall, so probably August. And what is this, May? So this, I assume
at least 6 or 7 months.
This woman clearly did not know that she existed. Is this what I'm supposed to?
Or
believe?
was it clearly that she didn't like people of that?
I'm supposed to believe that this white woman never saw this black woman who's been living in this dorm?
No, she saw her. She was trying to figure out how to get her out.
Okay. So anywho, she calls the cops, and the woman has to prove that she is a student. So she opened up her door. She has a key, and they're like, "Yeah, we see that you opened up your door, but we still need your ID."
So did she have her ID?
She had her ID, but she was deciding on if she was going to show it or not.
Well, why? Why was she deciding when they needed proof at that time? They wanted to call the police on her.
She was offended. No, the police wanted to see her ID. She was offended that she.
So the police were already there. So the lady called the police.
The police came, mind you. It's like 5 cops. 5 cops shows up.
She was armed.
No.
Oh,
she was armed. She was armed with
5 cops.
She was armed with the key to open up, and then she left She had to leave her laptop and her materials upstairs.
Unsupervised.
Unsupervised.
Well, anybody could have came in and took it away.
Well, no, the cops were upstairs talking to the other woman. Then they had to do a background. So this is where they mispronounce her name in regards to a background. And then they said, well, her thing was expired. She's like, how am I expired? And then they started to ask her questions like, what school is she in? Now, there are some things I don't like about the video. I don't like the fact that she keeps calling the woman a little psycho. I'm not sure. Let's not do a diagnosis, but let's call a spade instead of saying if she's psycho. This is implicit bias. This is racism on its face. And Yale came out saying that they're deeply disturbed. Deeply disturbed is not the issue. And Lawrence Ross has a new book, and he's very famous for writing The Divine Nine. But Lawrence Ross has a new book that talks about blackballed. That's the title of the book.
Oh, wow.
And what he's trying
what a title.
Right.
Blackballed. How many times have you been blackballed?
And he's trying to explain what it's like to be on college campuses.
You be blackballed.
And what he's saying is that being black on a predominantly white institution,
you're being rolled through the campus.
You are being told. You're being told that these are each individual incidents like this, how they're handling Yale is exactly what he's talking about. These are individual, isolated incidents, and it doesn't talk about the deeper culture because no one wants to say that our culture itself, at the heart of it, is racist. And that is what, and Yale University and many of these universities in higher ed have been founded in racial and racist principles. It's been founded with the dollars of black
whips
of black boys. And I'm not even going to say that. We also have there are also indentured servants that they sold. Of the Irish descent that they sold in order to gain money for building this institution. Not including that a lot of these higher education places, how they get their land, they killed off Native Americans.
Oh yes.
So when we're talking about United States, we always like to talk about America and what America did, but let's talk about what higher ed did. Right.
Because they're the founders of all this other stuff that's happening right now.
No, and this is and it troubles me because
they're the ones educating us.
Absolutely, and I love the institution I went to, and I can talk about and it hit home to me because it made me think about one of my experiences at Pepperdine. So I went to DC for a summer. I lived in DC. I was an undergrad at Pepperdine, and I had 3 roommates.
They were white?
Yes. Women.
That was some fun, wasn't it, Elizabeth?
And within 2 weeks, they came and they said that they needed to have a meeting.
What about you being in there, huh? Was you
with the house with the person who was over the whole program?
They just couldn't get it.
So I had to sit in a meeting
and they were in here.
I didn't say that. You didn't even let me tell my story. And so they let me sit there. And they told me that they were uncomfortable with my presence. And I was like, what did I do? Did I eat your food? No. Do we talk? Yeah, we talk. But I don't feel comfortable sitting and watching television when you're watching television. And I was like, what did I do?
That means,
what
you
did
know
I do
what
to
that
you?
means.
What did I do to you? Anyway, they could not say that I did anything wrong. But the end result is I had to move.
Wow. So who has the power around here, people?
And I had to move.
Who has the power?
And where did I move to? The only other black person in the program, her and I had to share share an apartment together because everybody else was uncomfortable with my presence. Okay.
Well.
So this is not. And my point is that this is an incident that is not isolated.
Right. It's happening every day.
I was at one point full time at West LA College, and the police officers pulled me over while driving I was driving an A5 at the time. Pulled me over and asked me to describe all of the people who have been driving my car. They've been watching me on campus.
And that's extra profiling.
They've been watching me.
VIP profiling.
They've been watching me on campus, and they wanted to know who all had been driving on campus. They had no idea that I was a faculty member. I did not state that I was a faculty member.
Please don't tell them that, because you're not qualified, remember.
I did not state that I was I didn't want to say, why are you treating me this way? I am a faculty member. You shouldn't be treating anybody like
that
this.
part.
And I was like, I'm not going. And then they asked for my passenger's ID because they said that he was driving my car.
No way.
45 minutes before they pulled me over. And I was like, well, you're not going.
No way.
I told him, you're not going to take his ID because he's not the driver. You can have my ID because I'm driving.
Right.
And they wanted to give him a ticket from what they saw 45 minutes ago. And I was like, you're not going to give him a ticket from what you saw 45 minutes ago. And I'm not going to tell you who all has been driving my car because it's my car.
And if you didn't know it or not, I work here.
It's my car. No, I didn't talk about if I work there or not. But my point is, it's my car. And the fact that you let me know that you've been watching me come on and off to campus.
Like a criminal.
And then told me that whoever's been driving my car drives it recklessly. And I told them, then you need to pull them over.
Right.
When you see them driving recklessly, but pulling me over to ask me who's been driving my car is inappropriate.
Right. So what was the ending results to that?
The ending result is that 6 cops showed up. To not give me, to do nothing.
Just to watch you
and have a conversation. And they said they were going to give me a ticket. And I was like, okay, fine. They didn't, the vice president had to get involved and eliminated the ticket. And the vice president told the sheriff they had to come and apologize to me, which they never did.
Oh, wow.
The campus then knew this happened on a Friday. By the time Tuesday came along, I got emails to my account talking about I had to have all these different meetings about my experience on the campus. Because, I guess they were afraid that I was going to sue.
Well, I would have thought that too with that way you were treated.
And I didn't file a complaint. But my point is that this is the incidents that continue to keep taking place that people say that are isolated. But the common theme is that we need to talk about race in higher education. Mm-hmm. What is it about me, and what is it about this girl at Yale's campus?
And then Kanye too. Tie all that
what
together.
What is it about us?
Yes. Tie
that
it all
makes
together.
People feel so afraid.
Yes. Because if he was saying something that was totally different, that wasn't against his own people, would he really be getting all these hits?
If he was white, he would be deemed as a racist, and he would be extremely.
Well, he's a genius right now. He's a racist of his own color.
He may be saying things that are much more of the colonized.
Right. That's what it is.
Perspective.
It is, because he's sticking through their eyes. He's speaking through their verbal lingo.
But my point is, let this have been an Eminem.
Right.
Eminem's career would have been shut down right now.
Right.
But Kanye
2 million followers is nothing to lose.
Kanye West is still not getting shut down.
Right.
Kim Kardashian is still not getting shut down. And I'm not advocating that they should be shut down.
Right.
I'm advocating that we need to have a conversation.
About what he's looking at, everything that he said on an educational level. A scholarly level.
Yeah, it warrants a conversation instead of shutting him down and saying how offended we are.
Right.
Yes, I'm offended.
How can we change
But we need to have a conversation.
Yeah, how can we take the words that he said and use it in a more positive way?
Or to start a discourse. I mean, because essentially the thing is that what concerns me the most is that when you have people, young. See, I can handle this implicit racism a lot more now than I am at my age in my mid 30s. Mm-hmm. But my 16-year-old self, because I started off at Pepperdine at 16, was very fragile when it came to.
But you were still a young adult,
having to deal with this constantly.
Mm-hmm. From these older adults,
just my peers too. My mid 30s self. There are times I get tired of having to, because this is my profession and I love teaching. I love being in higher ed. I love being a professor. I even want to one day go back to Pepperdine. I view myself as an ally on these campuses.
And I feel the same way.
So
yes.
I love it. I love being there. I love the environment. But at the end of the day, I still feel as if I want to be the shield because I know what it's like at that 16-year-old self. And I don't mind taking the hit for
other people.
A 17-year-old little girl, a
who
17-year-old
may go through that same
young
experience.
man who is going to deal with this. And I have kids. I have babies. And I know that one day they're going to have to experience this hit on themselves. But I want to be able to make sure that they're able to overcome and still persevere, because dropping out is not the answer.
No. Giving up.
It's not the answer. But at the same
waiting
token,
for somebody to give it to you too, it's not the answer.
But at the same token, people like this young lady at Yale should not have to deal with it. And to have someone say that and Yale's administrator, we're just deeply concerned. That doesn't make me feel warm and cozy at night.
No, and it doesn't make you feel like you really want to see other people go there, because what are their experiences going to be like?
No, you're going to go there.
Oh, you're going to go there because of the reputation.
Right.
That you can get the higher paid job. But I'm saying experience. I just talked to one of my students, and I said to them, because they're going to a college, which is Santa Monica, right? And Santa Monica just experienced something which was racial. And my student was going through something at that college, right? And I told her, I said, when you're in a place where you really not wanted, you're going to have to fight more for your education. You know, because you're going to go to some people and you're going to need some assistance. And the way of them telling you sometimes no is saying that, oh, we don't have that right now, or it's not available, you know. So she went to get certain things like jobs and certain things. And instead of them telling you that I don't like you because of your color, they'll say, oh, we don't have a position right now, or we'll take your application. So they treated her like that because she was trying to figure out how can she be a resident when she was. It only took her a month and a half to become a resident before she started the school. Well, they took her through the ringer, and they sent her to the dean, and they spoke for the dean, and they told her some things that the dean was saying, which he didn't. But I'm just saying, when you're a person and you're living in a colonized school, or you're in a colonized environment, you have to be a fighter. You have to be determined, and you have to believe in yourself and know that as a black person, as an African American person, you are important and your life is important.
As anybody of color, because this happens across anybody of
anybody whose skin has some flavor to it.
I'm gonna need you to stop.
Well, I'm just being real. I'm coming from the real side.
Anyway, well, we appreciate you joining in today, and we will come back the next week to have a different conversation on a different issue. And we appreciate your comments. We appreciate your feedback.
Please, and give us something that
positive feedback or constructive
you know
feedback.
What?
Right?
Even if it's negative feedback, because you can
constructive feedback.
Constructive feedback, yes, because all feedback makes a difference. Yes, and it makes a difference because that's why we're here. We just couldn't take it no more. I couldn't watch seeing Fox like from the morning to the night and hear about Kanye and what he done and hear about, the fake news and all this and not give my own opinion about these situations coming from a person who have already experienced racism themselves.
A lot of us have, but the problem is like a lot of issues when it comes to race is very hard to prove. So even with your situation when it comes to
what about if you qualify for a job, you apply for a job, right?
But
I just got a point.
In California, we live in an at-will state. So it's very difficult to prove that somebody is discriminating against you based on race.
Okay, but I just have a question. So you apply for a job, you overqualify, right? They don't tell you why you don't get the job. They say you have an exquisite resume, but we're looking for somebody who's more endeavored. What is that saying? Endeavored, people. Look up that word endeavor and tell me what that means when you're applying for a job that you overly qualified for.
Carrie has now moved on to a different topic.
Sorry.
And we are now going to end this show.
Bye.
And we look forward to speaking with you and spending time with you next week.
Yes.
Have a good day.
Please join.